Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody to lesson 2. Seems like we lost a pretty good portion of the class
It's really nice.
this week, and I know it's a gorgeous day out too. So I guess I'm going to kind of tailor this one a little more because all of you are experienced fencers, and so this is going to be more of a fundamentals class, I guess. So even if you decide not to use this stuff yourself, they are still fantastic teaching tools for training new students and getting them off on the right foot, so to speak. So, yep, exactly. Just to review some of the stuff that I talked about last week, the two main takeaways were, what is measure, what is tempo, right? So that's when the action happens and where the action happens. That's the main thing. So tempo essentially comes from the fact that you can't do two contradicting motions at the same time. For example, you cannot move your sword to the inside while moving into the outside. So there, by committing yourself in that direction, you create a window of opportunity for your opponent to act in, whereby they can come around to the other side and hit you, for example. Everything that you do within measure comes at a cost in tempo, and all provides an opportunity for your opponent to respond or do something to you in response. So we want to keep our tempi as short as possible and keep our eyes open for any kind of tempi that our opponents offer us, no matter how small, because all of those can shave off that critical moment of time that's going to let you take away that win. So, and then measure, of course, being the further out you are, the fewer targets you have, but also the more time you have to respond. So safety decreases as you get closer, but so do your options for dealing with your opponent. So as you close that measure, as you get close to them, the closer you get, the more critical it is that you have control over your opponent's weapon, whatever form of control that takes, whether that is actually physically constraining their sword, having some sort of feint that thereby occupying their sword through timing and tempo, or what have you. But it gets more and more important to constrain their options as you get closer and enable yourself to have, you want to leave yourself more options open, which is really what constraint does. I can hit you, you can't hit me. That's really what you want. So leaving that at that, we're gonna get into, so now we talk about, where, when, we're gonna talk about the what, because everything else kind of serves that. So all of this is body mechanics, blade mechanics, right? That's what everything boils down to. So we're gonna start with body mechanics, just because you can really mess up your blade mechanics if your body mechanics are off. So we're gonna start with just the absolute, bare bones fundamentals. And I know everybody in here is experienced, but I also want to underscore, you're gonna hit plateaus in your development, right? Like you're gonna reach a certain point where you're not growing, you're not getting better, you're having a hard time. Most of the time, there's a couple ways to break through. Tora actually keyed me out of the other one. One is explore new stuff. Try something weird, shake it up, fight with your offhand, or fight with your other hand, fight with a different secondary, fight with a shorter weapon, like that kind of thing, kind of shake it up. But I find too, more often than not, it's your fundamentals that are holding you back. So it's always good once you've done that expansion, explore new territory, explore new content, try new things, then bring it right back to these fundamentals, and this will help you break through those plateaus. So we're gonna get into, again, just brass stacks basic stuff. So the first thing to know, so you're standing on guard, right? So why do we stand on guard the way we do, right? I follow a principle of, everything's derived from your feet, right? So hips follow, knees follow feet. Actually, they really don't have an option, but we can make them go directions we don't need them to go, right? But your knees are gonna follow your feet. Your hips are gonna follow your feet. Your torso, your shoulders are gonna follow your hips, and your arms can thereby be upset by what's happening up here. So if this isn't solid, this is not gonna be, right? So, quick example. I'm aiming at Hannah. I want to boot her in the snoot, right? Here, let me come into your hand. So, go ahead and hold out your hand. Hold out your hand. Just flat out, give me a turn. Okay. So, I want to hit this thing, right? If, for example, my foot is turned to the inside, and I want to go hit that, because Because you'll see people fighting like this, right? Because they didn't train the way we do. So they're fighting this way. If I go into a lunge and I follow that through, knee follows foot, right? Oh. Everything else follows that too. So now I'm off, I'm not hitting my target. My arm is dead straight. Everything else is staying the same. It is solely because my body follows my foot that I cannot hit her hand, right? So now I'm having to physically compensate for a flaw that's happening down here, right? So let's start off with those kinds of principles. So that's why principle number 1, front foot always points directly towards your opponent. Doesn't really matter what you're doing, right? So even if we're offset, I still want my front foot pointed toward her because my body's going to follow that front foot. Second is, okay, so we got that, good. We know where our front foot goes, pointed squarely at the opponent. So what do we do with the back foot, right? Because there's a few different ways, a few different schools of thinking, right? And again, with everything in sword play, it comes down to choices, right? There is no one true way. There's no book in the sky that tells you this is fencing, no matter what, like Carranza would tell you, right? No matter what these guys have to say, everything's a trade-off. So we want to understand what those trade-offs are. So I recommend when teaching people to let them be in the stance that's most comfortable, right? So ideally, you want your feet about shoulder width apart. I call this interval, by the way. So that's interval. It's the distance between your feet. So the higher it is, the less, I guess, the less quick you're going to be to shift your weight, right? Because your weight is higher up. It's harder to move around, right? So even if you are upright, you still want to get a good bend in the knees, right? Even if you've got a narrow step. Now this, of course, is going to make my lunges and my steps longer because I've got more, I guess, more spread to give there. Versus another thing that you'll see people do also is an interval that's too long. So they'll be up here like this, kind of trying to like this. And they can't lunge very far, right? So the good thing is their opponent is, what you see is what you get. They're really not going to be able to get much more distance, right? So we want to hit a good balance point between those, especially starting off new fencers, because they're going as they do their advanced and retreat practice, and as we're going to get into when I start teaching the dog walk, that's either going to get wider and wider, or it's going to get narrower and narrower, right? So long story short, about shoulder width apart. This is a nice balance point between having reach, but also not being so extended already. Like, this is very stable. Like, I'm not going anywhere. It's gonna be very difficult to knock me down, difficult to get me to give here, but I don't have much space to work with. So we're gonna keep it nice and comfortable, about shoulder width apart. And notice how my shoulders stay level with my hips, right? Leaning back, and I'm leaning forward. Now, getting into that, again, everything's a trade-off, right? So some schools say you should lean forward. Some schools say you should lean back. Which do you do, right? Well, again, starting students off, I like to start with keeping it centered so that you can always experiment and play with that later. But your home base, like where you train at, where you're comfortable with, nice and balanced, right? Ready to move, ready to take care of any opportunity that might present itself. And again, I'm not upsetting my shoulders. Life is good here. Relaxed. Talk about the back foot a little bit. So again, hips follow feet, right? So you'll see people do this. What did that do?
Turn your hips and your body further away.
Yep. See how I'm narrower? So you'll see some people talk about doing this. If that works for you, great. I tend not to teach that because, especially in rapier, so in FA or small sword especially, like you see this a lot in small sword, because you want to provide a narrower target, right? So you can hide behind your sword. In rapier, we want to actually have this hand in play. We want to be able to use it, but we don't want to be completely squared, right? So you see this kind of gradient here? It's a matter of choice. What are you giving up? What are you getting, right? Here, I'm completely squared up, which again, you've seen me do in sword and dagger, right? Completely squared up. This gets my offhand as far forward as possible.
Do you have your back foot a little bit off the heel off the
I
ground?
am. Yep, I'm up on the ball of my
Yep.
foot, and I'll talk about that too here in a minute. So, yep, here completely squared up, but again, very wide target. You know what I mean? Very difficult to protect all of that. So, again, starting people off, I like a nice, balanced, centered approach. Again, people can play with how they like to stand. In Rapier, it's generally unsafe to keep completely narrow because you now cannot protect yourself, right? With your offhand, you can't cover all of that. Here, I actually can. I can clear that, but I'm not. Let's see what happens to my sword arm too. Hand out, this. So in the same way, if I square, I lose distance, right? But I also gain more reach with my dagger, which is helpful. So it's a trade-off. If it was ranked beginner here, I wouldn't even be like getting into necessarily whys and wherefores. I'd just be showing them the basic move. But starting people off, just a nice, comfortable, about a 45-degree, right? It's nice, comfortable. And I'm going to talk about weight distribution too. So, what is the difference between a forward lean, a backward lean, and a forward weight and a backward weight? You guys, have you thought about the difference? Maybe that they're not all the same, right? There's a big difference. Check this out. So, feel through your feet. Is there more pressure on one foot than there is on the other? So, what I can do is drift over this back foot. Now, am I leaning backwards? My torso is not leaning. Right? But by shifting this way, now my weight is entirely on the back foot. Right? Actually, that's about 75-25, right? Now I am back weighted.
So like the ways when you're moving it on your feet and
yeah,
the lean
see,
is...
you do not have a lean.
Right.
See that? Actually, I don't actually know if you're in frame.
No.
Yep. So,
Okay.
demonstrate what you just showed.
Okay.
So, yep, exactly. So back weighted, that's a backward lean. Now a backward lean will almost necessarily now you feel the pressure back.
Yeah.
Right. But now you're also upset.
Right.
Right. It's very difficult to operate from that position. Right. So in the same way, if we're talking about Fabrus's lean, what he does not do is this. So let me show that again. This, right? Now I'm definitely weighted over my forward foot. I have less weight here, so if I pick this up, I drop forward very quickly, right? I'm not here. This is also hell on your back, right? Because all of the pressure is right here. We are not doing this. What he is doing is it's just like a squat, where you throw your center of gravity back, and then you come up. It's the same thing. What I'm actually doing is pulling my hips back. See that there?
Yeah.
See the difference? I am evenly weighted on both feet. There's a little bit more back there, right? A little bit more.
Okay, so on that one, it's more just pulling your hips back away from the target.
Bend that knee. Yep. And as your hips drop down, keep bending that knee. There. That is a fibrous lean.
Okay.
That's how you do that, right? So what it does is it pulls this target away from your opponent, so it's further to reach, and then it hides this little narrow area now behind this. That's the idea, right? Making yourself as small a target as possible so your opponent's got to really come in. But again, feel the difference. What we're not doing is this. That is not fibrous, right? That's not a lean. That is just shifting you're now like top heavy. You're forward weighted, right? But you're not balanced. This is balanced, but I'm also lean. So I don't tell people to do the lean at first because it's really tricky to do, and unless like your footwork's pretty solid to begin with, it's tough to do. And unfortunately, it does turn unless they're like really serious, it does turn a lot of people away. Yeah, I don't want to do that. They don't do it anyway. If you want to be a really like badass single sword fencer, do it because it's great. It works. But for starting off people, I don't start there. What I do start with, evenly balanced, but I tell them to load, I call it gang loading. So you load the back leg though, right? So, check. So evenly balanced, and I sink there. See that?
Yeah.
So you're putting a lot of pressure, a lot of tension on this leg, so that when I lunge, it comes off quickly, right? Because here's the thing. When you go to lunge, you're gonna do that anyway. So, you know those people are like, oh my God, you're telegraphing, you're like phoning ahead. I can feel when they're coming to attack me, right? You know why you can feel that? It's because what they do is, so if I'm upright and I want to hit you, guarantee you, I'm gonna sink, then throw. Because I have to build up that dynamic tension in that muscle to throw a lunge at all. I have to, if I want to throw it quickly. Otherwise, it's gonna wind up looking like, right? Not very fast, not very scary. Versus, right? But you saw what happened. I had to sink first. Hey, I'm gonna hit you. Then I throw it. And by that time, I'm either eating a sword or you're in the next county over, right? So, start off there. Start off gang loaded, right? Already be there so that when you do an advanced lunge, it looks like, right? I'm already there. I don't have to sink.
I'm talking about trade-offs, so when you're like just doing advanced retreat, isn't that a bit more pressure?
It does.
On your back foot.
It does, but fortunately, it's not an intrinsic mechanical disadvantage.
Okay.
It's something that your body can adapt to.
Okay.
So try to stay center weighted, keep the shoulders upright, right? There. Feel that?
Yeah.
Yep. So then there's the question, and you pointed it out, do I lift up my heel or do I put my heel down? Right? The whole answer is that it depends, right? Everything comes at a cost. Now, I can tell you, operating on the ball of your foot, if you're doing anything but a squared stance, is it's very difficult on like mixed and varied terrain. So if you're fighting in the grass, so like this is the big SCA thing, like if you're fighting in the grass, in the fields, around scrubbery, rocks, that kind of stuff, you're probably going to want to fight with your heel down because it's much more stable and you're less likely to, I guess, like torque your leg, right? But if you're fighting indoor on smooth surfaces and it's consistent, and you're good to go, I say lift up the back heel. So I read a study about, because if you notice what epic fencers do, like all of them now, what do they do, Hannah? You see them?
I haven't watched any.
You guys watch Olympic fencing?
I avoid epic.
They do this,
In saber too, they do that.
right? This bouncy
Yeah.
action, right? Try doing that with like a 3-pound sword for a prolonged period and see how long you know what I mean? We don't bounce. But the closest thing that we can get to that is by lifting that heel and gang loading that whole leg. Also, I mean, it takes what it does. So talk about gang loading, right? So it takes some of the pressure off of the thigh and puts it into the calf. So now your calf is assisting with the motion. Much easier, right? And it's easier to maintain for prolonged periods. The trick is though, it's harder to do, right?
The other thing it does is it acts as a shock absorber, so when you come back, you can sit in.
You bounce back.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might retreats are much bouncier this way. Yeah. Yep. That's one of my favorite things about it. Is that nice bouncy, quick.
Yeah, because otherwise you have
turn.
to shift your weight.
Yeah. You have to sit, step, then come back. Versus you can bounce this way. So it's, shock absorber. That's exactly right. So it's up to you. When we go to the duck walk, I start people with their heel down. Because again, it's more stable, it's a bit easier for them to do, but eventually, and especially as we blend that into like double advances, double retreats, that kind of thing, that foot's gonna come up. And hopefully they'll have those basics grained in or drilled in well enough that it won't be a huge adjustment, and actually it'll feel a bit easier. So, but I tend to start them off with the heel down. So, okay. Let me see if there's anything about that I did not cover.
And saber fencing, besides doing the skips,
Okay.
they also like start doing this.
And then the hand position and your offhand placement. So when teaching people, I just start them off like literally holding out an apple, like just like you would hand somebody an apple. So I'm gonna just let your hands fall by your sides. Just let them fall. Don't try to guard anything. Okay? Don't pull it inward or outward. Just literally, you can feel it hinging, right? Can you feel that? Just let it dangle, right? Let it swing. And the way that it swings, let it swing up, and that's where you put your hand. That's it. Now, if you turn your palm up, that's a very, very strong fourth guard. That's it. It's that simple, right? Just literally, just in that line, pick up your hand. And you're there. So you're coming across, Ramsey. You're coming across.
Across?
Yeah. Here, come here. So you sort of, okay. Let your hand dangle. See, you're still hinging. You're hinging this way. Hinge this way. There, that's it. Bam, strong fourth guard, right? That's it. Now put sword in hand. Yeah, that's the way you hinge. Just like bend, relax. There. Strong fourth guard. I think your hilt might be under. Oh, you're also using a single. It's up to you.
Yeah. What would be the better?
So you have really big, thick gloves, so you probably can't fit your fingers in there this way. But this ideally is like a 3-point. That's how you want to do it. So look at the difference. So here, right? Like I have to really cock my hand over, but look at how it exposes that still.
Right.
Right? Versus, think you can hit it now?
Doubtful.
Okay, so that's why and I was gonna get into that with everybody. Does anybody actually like sat down and talked about like gripping the sword, how to hold it?
A year and a half ago.
It gets yeah. Everybody just assumes that you know that. Let me finish up this. Yeah. Okay, so let me just finish up this thought. So again, just hand. So this idea of the hands dangling and the natural movement. You see how like if I helicopter rotated both arms like super duper fast, you could see like a disc, right? Like I would look like a TIE fighter, right? Like you'd see that those two planes, right? Visualize that because it's very important, okay? So that's your box, that's your lane, that's your hallway, okay? And your arms should almost never be moving outside of that, almost never, right? That's your box. So if I come on guard and I'm out here, I'm wrong, right? And ideally, my most protected place is when on that side is going to be, so the furthest I can go is in that plane, right? And that's where I want to be. I don't want to drift inward because then I open it up, right? I want to be as far to the outside as I can go, but not outside of that. Okay.
So Mike Roth was talking to me about this last CSG. So if you're like when you're doing a parry with the offhand or with the sword, it's basically just rotating. Yeah, you're staying here. It would be more just a nudge without you moving your arms. More just in here.
Yep. So I've got a drill we're gonna do later to demonstrate that.
Okay.
So, okay. So let me circle back and talk about holding the sword. Everybody, grab your swords. Yeah. I love things that are like so like simple or like so fundamental that people just forget. Like, hey, did you remember to breathe? Do you know how to hold the sword? Or like why we hold swords certain ways, right? Because again, everything's a trade-off. There's no right, wrong way to do it. You just got to know what you're trading off. So everybody come a little closer because you're going to need to see what I'm doing with my. Just circle up. You guys are going to need to see what I'm doing with my hands here. Okay, so the most common way that I've seen people hold their swords is with a single finger grip. So that is, and I might have to get like a separate little video for this, but it's a single finger grip. And you're literally just placing your thumb on the ricasso.
One second.
Bing. Excellent. Okay. It's dangerous to go with them. Thumb's going to go on the back of the ricasso, and then your trigger finger is going to go through like a trigger, and then that's how you're going to hold it. Okay. So yeah, place your thumb on the ricasso. So what this does, like this is going to be a lot more cut centric. What this does is it braces the sword against your thumb, so that when you turn those cuts, you hit with the full force of your hand. Like you can really, and you can snap it at the end because you've got your. So now I can pull that trigger finger down, just crack somebody at the very end of it, right? So this one, very, very common. It's what most people start off with. I don't like teaching this one because, is this a cutting weapon? It can, it certainly can. And don't ever think that it can't, because you'll find out the hard way that it can't, right? But is that what it's best at? Is that really making the most of its strengths? No, it's not. This is a linear weapon. This is for taking advantage of itty bitty holes in your opponent's defenses, because again, you're not nearly as protected as you think against this thing. So this can get into itty bitty tiny holes. So I want to make sure that I want to optimize kind of like my accuracy is the main thing, and then like my ability to push through a line without being collapsed. So here, and this is a geometric principle, right? Anytime there's a break in the line, it's a weak point that can be collapsed. Okay? So if I hold it this way, by force, I can't hold this straight. If I do, I open up the upper part of my arm. It's really straining to do so. It's really difficult. It's hard on the tendons, right? And then I do, no matter what. So if I want to keep like the natural straight line of my hand, then I create an angle on the sword, and that's not good, right? So what I want to do is have, and this is for single sword predominantly. What I want to do is have a hand grip that is going to allow me to keep it as straight a line as possible and facilitate that in my wrist. So I teach it's the classical Italian grip. Like if you've ever like seen classical Italian, what they do is they put one finger here on the flat of the ricasso, the other finger here, thumb there. So it's like three points of contact, right? So with this, I actually already have some pretty good fine manipulation, right? So even if I just lift it, even if I lift these up, I don't use them, I still have some pretty decent fine manipulation, right? I can do stuff. Then I brace it with these back fingers, and now, senor, now we're talking, right? Now I can keep my blade straight. There's no break in that.
So the index finger is like pushing up against the top of the guard.
Well, it depends, and this is tricky because it depends on the sword you're using.
And your finger.
So no, you should not be bracing it up
Right.
against the top of the guard, because if that happens, you hit somebody, boom.
Yeah,
I have a broken finger, right?
Yes.
No, we don't want to brace
Wondering
that.
about that.
So if I was going to hold yours, I would hold it this way.
Okay. So just kind of curved out to one side.
Yeah, see this?
Yeah.
Feels really nice, actually. Yeah. Try that out. Yep. So this one. Take a look at it. This one's tricky because it's turned a little bit, but yes. Yep. Yeah, you had it.
It seems a little short distance between the two.
Yeah. And some of it may depend on the sword too. You know, it's like-
Yeah, that's gonna be pretty similar to what.
So you have like a nice little groove there to put the thumb in.
It's like you're
Just
down
rests
pushing
on
the thumb
there, and that just wraps around to help brace it. And then you just brace it. There you go.
I'm used to this, but that's, so,
There you go. Just this.
yeah.
There you go. Just play with it a little bit, find where it feels comfortable. But the idea is that you should be able, just like a way, you should be able to manipulate without your back two fingers. And then now that you've got the bracing
So,
support, you're good to go, right?
this string right here, this one on the bottom side, right?
I'm sorry, what's your name, bud? Carter.
This
Let me take a look here.
right through.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, look at it.
Learning.
See that? Wonderful. Feel that now from the wrist. Just feel that. Very easy now, right? Very easy. And it'll take some time for your hand to get a little bit stronger, especially those front fingers, because I tend to forget how hard that is at first, because I'm like, okay, it's a really heavy rapier that I've been fighting with for years.
I
Right?
want to try it.
Not a problem. Big strong fingers, right?
Yeah.
The with that, it can take a little bit of time, so if it's uncomfortable,
I'm
just
there, but I'm not
shake
like,
it off,
pressed up against
come
it.
back to it again, but
Just
you
close
got it
to
right.
But it's close.
Yeah, if you're
Yeah, just if I hold this
hard, it's a bit
stable,
harder.
it's
Yeah.
watching the angle of this.
Now, with the power
So maybe 15-degree angle.
Hopefully this will take some of it out.
this is this one all you can smell.
So you're a little bit deeper on it here.
It's just what you need. So just another way you swing it.
Well,
You're gonna want that.
hopefully switching to this might help with that. We'll see.
Yep. Yep, it will. It will. Because yes.
Signature.
That's good, yes. You've got nothing. See? That's the
I
whole
prefer
idea.
not to leave my
That's the
prints
whole
where-
idea. You've got nothing on this outside. I have to come.
Weird to have fun, Eric.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that is kind of fun.
Okay. So we are going to get into the duck walk now. So we can put our swords away now that we know how to hold them. So again, it's a placeholder, right? So you're gonna keep your hands this way. Offhand, really, you can kind of put it wherever you want it. I mean, if you don't have an offhand, you could have it up here, I guess. Like you can use that like the counterbalancing action if you want. I like to teach having your hand here. And the reason why is it's a Faber sort of thing. So if just a real quick demo, just anybody with a sword. Eric, do you want to grab it? The whole idea behind this is that if she lunges, right, is that I've got my hand already protecting my face. Is the idea, and it's very easy to move to the other side. Like it's a very easy motion. So my hand's up here, I'm good to go. And then it's also just a very, very straight, I don't have to like move my hand around. First, like, you might even like be able to do something like this, kind of like more Wing Chun, kind of, I've seen this too. You can do that too if you want, like whatever. But I tend to teach up here, so this way, like it's like, you're not gonna catch a stray blade in the eye or something, just in case. I like having that up there. All right, that's, if anybody wanted, that's fine. Okay, duck walk. So, as I've touted before, this, in my opinion, is the best way to teach basic footwork, the advance, the lunge, that kind of thing. And we're going to break it down into two motions, or again, basically two tempi, which is kind of what an advance or a retreat is, because there's the time when they lift their foot, and then there's the time when their foot lands, right? Both of those are tempos that you can work with. But what we're going to do is you're going to start with that stance. So we just went through the whole discussion about balanced, centered, gang loaded on the back leg, hand palm up, shoulders level, hand right here. And then what we're gonna do, well, here, I'll turn this way maybe so you guys can see, is you're gonna put so leaving everything else, this is the trick, leaving everything else completely unperturbed. You hinge on your front knee, and you go out on your heel, right? So, the more stable you are in doing this, the cooler you are. Okay, that's the challenge. So, if your shoulders are rocking when you do this, that means you probably didn't have a very balanced stance to begin with. Right? You should already be there. Right? So really, anytime you lift up your front foot, if you're in a balanced stance, you're gonna fall forward. Right? If I was back weighted, I wouldn't fall. Right? If I was forward weighted, I'd fall forward very quickly. I'm balanced. So when I look at this foot, I am going to go forward, but it's not going to be very fast. I'm going to have time enough to catch myself with my heel. Okay? That's the first motion of the duck walk. Second motion is, again, leaving everything else unperturbed. I'm going to lift up my back foot, and I'm going to return to my on-guard stance. Roll forward. So heel out, roll forward. Heel out, roll forward. This is the duck walk. Okay? So, again, a lot of this is going to hinge on you being low, because if you're not low already, your shoulders are going to start moving around, right? You're trying to move as little as possible, right? So it really should just be your legs that are doing anything at all. We should not see arcing of the shoulders. It's just translate this and just roll right on forward. So I'll demonstrate a couple more times. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and let that front foot pull you the appropriate distance, right? And see, there's the thing. So if you're not sunk down and leaning, just gonna slow down, Ramsey. You are not there yet.
Okay.
You are not there yet. Trust in me, okay? Not there yet. So, one thing to really, really pay attention to: your back foot should only be moving the length that your front foot is long, if that makes sense, right? So, you guys look on the ground here, right? So here's that, right? So at this line is where my heel is. When I kick up my front heel, so about 1 tile, right? So when I roll forward, my back foot should move 1 tile. 1 tile. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and if you're not feeling the burn, you're doing it wrong. Which is absolutely, I mean, your thighs should be crying for mercy as you're doing this. Okay? So, see, you're not duck one. So, take a slow, okay? So, balance. Roll that back there. Front, so the knee should be go over your ankle. No, like right, like 90 degrees here. About 45 there. That looks good. That looks good. Now, okay. Relax. Okay. Now, again, all you do is move the front foot. That's it. Then you roll it forward. Bring the back foot up. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2. Okay. You're doing proper advances. You're doing proper advances. 2, 2. A couple more. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. So it may seem like goofy fundamentals. I'm too good for this. I'm past this. I can move my feet. No, you can't. This is how you do it. Okay? Take it slow. Do these until you can't screw them up. Okay? Video yourself doing them. Okay? They are so foundationally, fundamentally important. I promise you, because I started doing these, I can move my feet, right? I think you guys have seen it. It's because of these. It's because I do these, right? So, starting off with this as a foundation, even if you have other bad habits, this will grind out all of them, okay? We'll start you off from fresh, and if you take it slow, 1, 2, 1, 2, not 1, 2, okay? You're not there yet. 1, wait for it, right? 2, 1. I'm in no hurry to go anywhere. Am I off balance? No. At no time during this am I off balance. You see what I'm getting at, Ramsey? At no time during this action am I off balance. You see my shoulders upset. You see my torso upset, my hips upset. No. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay? So you'll notice there's a few. So again, sin number 1 is racing too fast. Okay? Jumping past these because they're too simple. They're not. This is how to fence. This is fencing at its most fundamental. Second most common thing I see is the interval, right? So what I see very, very often is, right? Lean into the burn. If your thighs aren't burning, you're wrong. Okay? It's like you should be feeling, oh, this is really hard to stay this low. Ow, ow, ow. Right? So you're low, you're gang loaded, you're strengthening those muscles. Okay? No amount of like squats and leg presses is going to make you strong enough for this. It's a targeted exercise. The best exercise for fencing is fencing. So doing this, again, do it right. It will grind out all of the flaws in your advances. And now we're about to get into the retreat. The retreat is a little bit trickier, just to get, because you're going backwards, you can't see what you're doing. That's the other trick. You should, at first, maybe you can like check your feet to make sure that your interval is there, but really you want to get to a point where you're not looking at your feet, because, man, if I'm fencing you and you look at your feet, yeah, it's gonna be a bad day, right? So, the way the retreat works is it's the exact opposite. It's the exact same motion, just in reverse, right? So, but this time the impetus for the, actually the impetus is gonna come from the same spot. So it's gonna come from this muscle, right? So when you're doing your duck walk, when you're doing your advance, this is the muscle in action. I'm literally just hinging off the knee, that's all I'm doing. In this one, on the retreat, I have to actually push off of this thigh, right? And then I bring this leg up underneath me. Pull back, now bring the leg up underneath me. A bit like that. See how it's a little trickier? That looks good, William. You're not rolling off your foot. You're not rolling off your heel, right? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2. See that?
You're basically lifting your whole back foot up all at once, right?
Yep. So back foot. So back foot's catching me.
Okay.
Right. If I don't lift up my back foot, I wind up doing this. Right. You don't want this. But I am. So I'm lifting up the back foot and pushing up the back leg, catching myself, and bringing my foot up underneath me. 1, 2, 1, 2. So start in the balance stance. Balance stance. Okay. Now lift up the back foot so this muscle moves you. That's it. So now don't cock your head. Don't cock your hips back. Your foot's gonna catch your promise. So shoulders level. Roll off the front foot. Catch yourself with your back. Lift them all down. There.
Too much jump.
Yeah, not well, smooth, nice and smooth. You should feel a nice. Here, let's get back on.
I feel like I just pull myself back and I rear.
Yeah,
like I'm just catching with rear.
Yeah, because what you're doing is you're engaging these muscles to make you move. That's what we're trying to grind out, right? We're trying to isolate, and this is another huge important thing, especially if you guys learn from me from any amount of time. Muscle isolation, movement isolation is everything. Okay? So the only thing you should feel moving, because so whatever it is that lifts your, so maybe the hip flexion a little bit to lift up your back foot, but most of where you should feel the push is just this muscle alone. Okay? So again, if you don't start low, it's not gonna work out, right?
Are you you almost start with the front foot then instead of start
absolutely
pushing
are.
before you move the back foot?
If
Well-
you're going back, yeah, you start. You push
you'll
off
have
with
to,
the front.
this is something you'll have to feel out.
Okay.
And kind of get, it's one of the challenges of doing this. Unfortunately, I can't just tell you to do that and then
Yeah.
you do it. So that's where the practice comes in, is you're gonna have to feel it out. The main thing to take away, right, the real thing you wanna focus on is only using this. Like this is where the energy of your motion comes from, is this muscle only.
And for me, mentally, isolating it feels like I'm just straightening this leg.
That's exactly
and
what
then
you're doing.
allowing my inertia to, and kind of controlling my inertia from that. Like you can just straighten the leg and like pop up.
Right.
But if I straighten that leg, but also allow my left foot to glide, so I don't.
That is
I'm not a
100%.
proponent of standing or lifting it and then setting it back down. Like I like to glide across.
Right.
But yeah, if I just straighten this leg and let myself glide back, that feels like what works for me.
That's what 100% what you're doing. It's 100% what you're doing. So what this does is, again, it keeps this unperturbed. That's the whole idea. So if you're coming up, it means you're not low, right? Because I'm straightening out a 45-degree angle, right? So this is about 45. That's about 45, right? make sure you're keeping it 1-2. So yeah, so there should be a second there where you're able to hang out off balance, right? Where you hang out in the middle. You should be able to just hang out there, right? At no point, because again, I can reverse it too, right? It's literally only 2 motions that you're doing. Sink down a little more in. Bounce. All you're doing is literally this in here. This is all you're doing. It's literally like you're breathing over. Right? That's all you're doing. Just extending the leg fully, letting your so that's lifting your back leg, right? So, quick example. If I lift up my back leg and I don't push it. Here, let's bring it back to the camera. Okay. If I lift up my back leg and I don't push with my front leg, what happens? I fall back, right? I have to catch myself. I have to. Right? Awkward. Feels weird, right? But we're using that action in combination with a push from the thigh, and with those two kind of working together, that's what's, we're using both of them. Right-handed, there you have it. There it is. Okay. There you go. Yeah, she's got it now. Everyone let's take a look. Okay, great. Turn your, stand like this. Okay. So maybe leg mount back here. Turn it a little bit. Be a little hard on the thighs, right? Because it's going to burn a bit. But try standing that way. Now push off the front foot. Just bring it back, tuck it back up underneath. We'll work with you on a bit more. Okay, all right, everybody shake it off. Water break. Water break. And
Now I see why a lot of SCA fencers fight that way, whereas I fight more this way. But that's, part of it is the Fiore, they didn't have heels on their shoes, so they didn't have the grip, and they tended to slide if they went to the heel. So that's why I fight that way, is because I don't have heels on my shoes either.
all right. So now in time, you will smooth this out, okay? Until you can get this part, until you can get this 2-part, be able to hang out in between, you have it isolated, the rest of your body's not, until you have that right, don't move on. Don't jump ahead. But eventually, and we'll do this, I'm gonna send everybody home to do homework, right? So this week, you, seriously, just 10 minutes, you can't do it for 10 minutes, to make, a day. You can't spare 10 minutes to make yourself a more badass fencer, right? That's all you need. You don't need to do this for an hour. It's not good for you to do it for an hour, right? But give it 10 minutes, give it your all, really sink down, really feel that burn, okay? If your thighs aren't burning, you're wrong, okay? Yeah.
I was feeling more here.
Oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
your thighs should be burning. Then eventually that turns into 1, 2, becomes 1, 2, 2, 2, 2. And suddenly you're able to do footwork, right? Your footwork looks good. And then we get into practical application okay, so what do I do with that now that I know how to advance your training?
So one of the things I did when I was studying Fiore footwork was I had a room kind of like this, and I would go from there to here, and then I'd do the reverse back. And I would do that for 15 minutes. Now, if you're home and you don't have the space, you can be watching TV and do this. within the space limit you have, or go on your driveway or someplace like that. I work at a
Okay, let's bring it into the camera because I'm pretty sure this whole thing looks like me just talking in a room. So yes, there is an actual class. Okay, so that's the duck walk. Again, I cannot emphasize enough how important that is, and to give it the time it's due. It will pay off huge. The payoff is huge. I mean, so attacking, right? So that's our adventure achieve. The next most basic thing is the lunge, right? Everybody uses the lunge thing. So I'm going to get into that, and if we still have time, if you guys care or are interested or still have the attention span, I can dive into some just basic like blade work, guards, stuff like that. So I teach a four-part lunge. So this is how I introduce it to everybody that I teach from brass tacks. So first I teach the duck walk, then I teach the 4-point lunge. So the way it looks is this. So you're on guard. So just watch for now. Just watch. So, because it's tricky. There's stuff you're not going to catch. So extend, lunge, retract, recover. Those are the 4 parts. And you need to give each one its due. Okay? Extend. It's not the lunge yet. Lunge, retract, recover. Okay? Those are the 4 parts. So, extend first, right? Why extend first?
You're not going to hit him.
You're not, okay.
Really not.
Okay? So, Ramsey, we don't attack with our shoulders. It's a huge misconception. We do not actually, when we sword fight, we do not hit our opponent with our arm. We point at what we're wanting to hit and we step through it. We push through with our back leg. We kick them in the chest with our sword is what we do.
They're sharp.
Okay.
You don't need the.
You know what I mean?
It's going to throw in inaccuracies.
Yeah. So, now, in reality, I openly admit, this is like the dirty little like fencing secret. Nobody, it's like the elephant in the room. Nobody wants to admit. Nobody actually gets to full extension before they do a lunge. Nobody does, because it's a huge amount of time, right? That's a huge opportunity for your opponent to just grab your sword and ace you, right? Or a ton of other things to go wrong, right? But if you don't train to give the sword precedence and to lead with the arm extension first, if you don't train that in and ingrain it at first, you're gonna be a step behind, because your arm is always gonna be wanting to move at the same time as your body anyway. What happens is your arm's gonna be slower. So 5 years down the line, you're still throwing hits like this. Did you catch that? What led first? Right? That's not a lunge. That is a lunge, right? Now, really, I'm doing them both at the same time, right? But notice I'm giving precedence to the sword. Sword goes first. Sword enters the space first. Sword clears the way, and then I push through with my leg. Okay? If you don't train, extend, lunge, you're going to do lunge, extend. That's the natural human way you're going to do it. You have to train against that, so that ultimately, yeah, they do kind of end up coming out at the same time. I mean, watch any Olympic fencing bout. Those are the best fencers in the world. You'd think if they were the best fencers in the world and that was the way you had to do it, you had to get the full extension before you lunged, that's the way they would be doing it. But they don't, because it doesn't work, right? Nobody does that. So again, the important thing is to train in leading with the sword, so that that's your instinct, that's where your mind's at, that's what feels right, so that they actually do come out at the same time, or actually with a very slight lead with the sword. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's why we start with extend. So it's extend. Now, another very, very important point. Have I leaned my shoulders into it?
No.
Am I throwing from the hip? Am I doing this kind of action? No. This, whatever I point at, it is going to go dead straight through that. So I don't have to aim. I don't have to have crazy point control, right? Because one exercise you see very commonly in the SCA is they'll hang a tennis ball, right? And then they'll sit here and try to like lunge at the tennis ball, this like wild ass moving target, right? All they're teaching themselves to do is like to throw from the arm and try to hit it with their arm. I don't have to, all I have to do is point. If I want to hit him on that button, you know what I mean? Like literally I'll just point at it and push through, and that's where it goes. it can't help but go right through there. Now, if I drop my shoulders first and then throw, well, what happens? Did I hit what I was aiming at? No. Okay? Again, this extend, this isolating the arm from the rest of the body is so important. Because you need to think of yourself not as somebody who's attacking. You think of your arm as more like a tank turret. Okay? So tank turret's straight, right? If the rest of the tank is doing this, is it going to hit what it's trying to aim at? No. Right? This is the tank turret. Make sure that the treads are steady. Right? The rest of it doesn't get disturbed. That's how you hit Wyoming. That's how you hit through. That's how you shoot through guards. That's how you do that kind of thing. So, extend. That's, again, always gets glossed over because I'll see it. You know. You have to actively train it in. Extend. Now lunge again. So the thing with the lunge is, again, we want our shoulders to be steady, right? If you have to sink before you throw your lunge, you're not sunk down enough. Okay. One tempo. Do not call ahead. You should already be sunk down when you throw that hit. All you're doing, so again, it's just like this, just like this, just like this. It should be traveling forward. I'm literally just translating the frame forward. Nothing else should be disturbed by that, right? Now, that's the lunge. And it should be explosive. So one thing you don't want to do, and I think it's going to mess you up when you do your lunges, is you sink down, and you'll want to do your lunges slow, right? Because slow is smooth is fast, right? That's true of advances and retreats. That is not true of the lunge. Don't do slow lunges, okay? I don't want to see that. There's no reason for it. The lunge is never, well, almost never, like a super slow motion, right? It should be bam, right? Hit explosive, right? Okay? Now, doesn't mean you need to be going 900 miles an hour, okay? I said explosive. It didn't necessarily mean like blinding fast, okay? If you're doing the rest of your stuff right, especially if your shoulders are level, if the attack is coming from if your arm extends without upsetting your shoulders, with a clean extension, and you're just translating your frame forward, your opponent is going to have a hard enough time just seeing the fact that you lunged at them. Which is a huge, like, their mind's going to be like, well, is he lunging? Is he advancing? What is he doing? I don't know. And while your brain's trying to figure that out, I'm already halfway to you. So you better make a decision, man. So, it's super important not to let any of what you're doing upset this. This should stay completely and utterly level as much as possible, right? So we can always round it out. I'm not perfect, but if you're noticing a sharp drop, okay, you probably need to get closer to the ground, or you're lunging too deep. Okay, there shouldn't be like a huge drop. Ideally, you want to come right in line. Right. Yep. But the big thing is, yeah, you're good. Yep. You might sink down just a little more. Okay. There. There. Look at that. See that?
Yeah.
Very minimal. Right? That's it. Very minimal. Okay. Step 3. Retract, right? Oh, yeah, retract. So, I'm in lunge position. This is a placeholder, okay? The reason I put it in there is because it's literally a placeholder for your opponent's riposte or whatever response that they're going to do, right? So as you're training this in, you can do like extend lunge, parry 5 recover if you want. You do extend lunge, like disengage recover. Whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily mean you're pulling your arm back every time, because you may not. I may lunge, and it might be the safest thing to just leave it out there, right? But as I train it in, what I need to have and what I want to train into my lunges is I'm going to respond to what my opponent does. Because once I discharge this lunge, either they run away or they're coming back at me. And I don't know which it's going to be, usually. I'm going to assume that they're going to come at me, and I'm going to have some kind of response like, immediately ready. So always be of the mindset, before you throw a lunge, what's going to happen immediately after? Okay?
So like 1 and 2 is training as if you're going to hit, and then 3 is assume you didn't hit and be ready to do something.
Yes. Yep. Again, it's just a placeholder, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that. There, it really isn't much more complicated than that. It's a placeholder. Now the recovery. Recovery is kind of tricky, right? So in the same way, like, because humans walk forward more often than not, right? We're not really like skilled at doing backwards stuff. So the same with the retreat. The recovery is a little tricky. So extend, lunge, retract. Now what I'm going to do. So you notice how this nice straight line. I am not locking my knee back. I'm not locking this in. I am not curving for the camera. I'm not rolling this. Horrible idea. Okay, I'm not going to do that. So instead, I've got a nice straight line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to break this. Okay, so I want you guys to play in this space. So give me extend lunge. Okay, then I want you to play around here for a little bit. See what happens when you go from straight line to just breaking the knee. What happens to your weight? It goes back, right? It drops back. You can feel it. So, 45. Put your knee over your ankle. Good. Now, put that leg back as far as you can make it go while keeping your this here. Is that uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Okay. So, stretch. Get more stretches in, right? So that's where you want to be. Okay. So what happens is if you bend this knee, bend the knee, bend this. There. Feel off balance. Feel your weight want to come back this way. So that's what we talked about. So then you just give it a little assist with this and you push yourself. So remember when we were doing our duck walk retreat, how we lifted up our back foot and our weight went back and we gave it an assist with the front leg? Same exact principle applies here. Are you guys noticing a theme? Okay. Super simple stuff. Extend lunge, leg breaks, weight starts going back, and I just give it the exact same assist, the same rolling, same exact rolling assist I did with my retreat duck walk. Extend lunge, track recover. Extend lunge, hang out, break the knee, feel that, play around in that, and really play around in that space. Get comfortable with it, right? Yeah, that looked really nice, Hannah. So when you lunge, you should have a straight line there. That's a lunge. That's a lunge. Good. You ever seen that? Cocking your hips back.
Up.
Cocking your hips back.
Okay.
Because what you're doing is you're using this to pull you back up.
Okay.
Use this to assist.
Okay.
And use your body weight.
Okay. So.
Lunge, good. That, better. So another small thing I'm noticing is you're turning your hips just a little bit as you lunge.
Okay.
Now, that's not an invalid thing to do. In fact, Progress teaches you your lunge to be here,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's a valid thing to do.
Okay.
Just be aware that that's something that might be stealing a little bit of time too. And upset there. Ooh, that looks good. Okay. And that is the 4-part lunge. What are the 4 parts?
Extend, lunge, retract, recover.
Ramsey, what are the 4 parts?
Extend, lunge, retract, recover.
Good. Now, that's part of your homework too. Do your duck walks, forward and back, 10 minutes a day. The lunge is optional, but if you're feeling hungry and you got an extra 10 minutes, do it. Make sure that you're isolating all 4 parts. I cannot tell you enough. Take your time. Please take your time with these. Okay? The payoff is huge. I'm not lying. The payoff is huge. What this becomes eventually is extend lunge, retract recover. Okay? And then eventually you bridge it into the full action. And then you start doing actually chaining it into your advances and retreats. And it gets more complicated from there. But if you don't get this basic building block to the point where you can't get it wrong, then the rest of the stuff is going to get you're gonna try to do more complicated things, and you're gonna wind up doing like a bunch of this garbage, right? And then, like you can't hit anything. You're super slow. Like it's take your time. It'll pay off, I promise. Okay, that's kind of like the footwork stuff for today. Do you guys want to call it here, or I can get into sword stuff? Okay, all right, we'll call it there for now then.
Yeah, hopefully next Saturday we'll have more people to
More people?
enjoy that.
Yeah, they skipped the awful part. That's why they skipped today. All right, guys, thank you so
But
much.
one of the most important
Thank you.